Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Tomorrow's Ummah podcast, where we discuss all issues and events related to young Muslims growing up in the West. This month is the month of Rabiul Awwal while we're recording this. And today we wanted to speak about the Prophet of Mercy, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Today I have with myself Dr. Abdullah Al-Qadri and our dear brother Abdullah Sheikh as well. Assalamu alaikum, boys.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Today's topic is, I think, a very special one. Obviously, we're talking about our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him. And we have a plethora of things to talk about. We can talk about the mercy of Rasulullah. We can talk about all the different defining characteristics of his kindness, generosity, and also how this is also the month of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's birth as well. And I think we'll follow this order as we speak today. And I think we can start off firstly with the mercy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and sort of characterizing and defining it. I think when people hear وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, we do not have a complete picture of what that mercy is and how we define it. So I think that's a good place to start, and we can go from there. So
Sure.
take it away.
I mean, I think it's incumbent, mandatory, fard, whatever kind of term you want to coin it, for any Muslim to be happy upon the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, that is the fundamental part of Aqidah. If you're not happy at the birth of our beloved Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you're not a Muslim. You have to be happy upon his birth. And there's story upon story, there's narration upon narration, various events in the Quran all stipulate the fact. And I think I would say every Muslim, alhamdulillah, is happy to be from the ummah of Rasulullah and is happy upon the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I think the topic that's a little controversial and what people have an issue with really is, should we and how should we express that happiness of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? So I think maybe we talk a little bit about that, kind of get what our, let's say, my personal perspective and your personal perspective is on that, and how we kind of navigate through that, really.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about a celebration here, and I think there are...
Sorry, people have the issue with the word celebration.
That's exactly what I was getting to.
Yeah.
There's connotations that are negative.
Yep.
That are always associated with celebrations.
Right.
And I definitely think that there are cultural aspects that get into the equation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking about, we come from South Asia, right? And we grew up in communities where we had different expressions of celebration, right? That maybe do not coincide with our belief, right? And go well beyond our belief and how we express it. For example, weddings, or even how we celebrate, these happy events in our lives.
Yep.
So when we're talking about a celebration, I think a lot of people have a lot to say.
Sure.
When it comes to the celebration of the birthday of Rasulullah.
Yep.
I mean, you've probably heard a lot of those things.
Oh yeah, I get my fair share on Instagram, Facebook. But again, I think it's a lot more confusion amongst the younger Muslims, and the way how we're not really able to explain it properly to them on how we actually celebrate Mawlid. For them, I feel like when they hear us saying, "Oh, we celebrate the birth of the Prophet," they think we got balloons out, we're cutting candles, we're singing songs, and we're dancing. They think all that is going on, but in reality, what it is it's a program, it's an event that describes the seerah, describes the beauty, describes the mercy of the Prophet, and what lessons we can learn from his sallallahu alaihi wasallam's lifestyle.
So now we're talking about the how.
Yeah.
Right? We first talked about the what, a celebration. I think celebration, I agree, it has all those negative connotations attached with it because of the society we live in, and just how, like, any celebration you look at, there's definitely going to be something that isn't healthy for you in your iman, right? But
before I think we move on, I think let's kind of tackle some of the crux of the matter here.
Yeah.
So there's some substance in it, so we can build upon.
Yeah.
I think, for example, one of the biggest opponents or strategies and or arguments against bid'ah is that everyone agrees that Rasulullah, and there's a very famous narration, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked, "Why do you fast every Monday?" And he said, "I fast every Monday because this is the day I was born." So many of the opponents against the celebration of of Rabiul Awwal and Milad of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, if you're truly happy upon the birth of Rasulullah, you should be fasting every single Monday rather than get a day, which is the 12th of Rabiul Awwal, and just celebrate the day of 12th of Rabiul Awwal as the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, I think that my personal perspective on this is pretty simple. It's that we feel happy every single day of the month, of the year, of upon the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we don't always have a Mawlid quote unquote celebration on the 12th. I mean, we just had one a couple days ago, and it's near the end of Rabiul Awwal.
Yep.
And there's been Mawlid celebrations. People have in Rabiul Thani, in Muharram, in Safar, and all of these different, in Ramadan. Everyone has these celebrations. Some people have them on a weekly basis.
Yep.
And I think one of my biggest things is individuals who do say that, they themselves, and I might be wrong, there might be some people, very few I think, that do celebrate Mawlid by fasting every single Monday just for that purpose. But they're few and far in between. And my simple question and answer to that is, if you don't fast on that for that specific day, unfortunately, fasting isn't considered a celebration. And this is wrong, because in Islam, fasting is a way to get closer to Allah. And anything that brings you closer to Allah is obviously and should be celebrated.
A positive act.
A positive act.
Yep.
Unfortunately, people don't look at it like that.
No, not at all.
Fasting is cumbersome, especially in the winter months, in the summer months. Winter months is a little easier, of course.
Yep.
So I think what tends to happen is people kind of get that muddled, and they attack the ahadith really on the face value of it, which is not bad per se, but every hadith, there has to be room. You can't hold the ahadith liable just for the specific words. Otherwise, we would still be building masajid with dirt and palm trees leaves.
Palm trees, yep.
Right?
They wouldn't be as advanced as they are now. And I mean, we're talking about different interpretations of our...
Can I add one thing before we move on from this
Yeah,
point? So
for sure.
you brought up fasting, and interesting. I was listening to something a few days ago, and it was one of the scholars, I forget his name, but he said, we often say Eid Miladun Nabi, right? And obviously it's known that we don't fast on Eid. So his question was, why did Rasulullah fast on the day that he was born, and you guys call it Eid Miladun Nabi when we're not supposed to be fasting on Eid?
So I think the way that they've kind of played with that is interesting. So every Jummah is a day of Eid as well.
Yeah.
In Ramadan, we still fast on Jummah. And when Rasulullah, this is I believe in most of them, but when Rasulullah was asked, why do you, why is Jummah a day of Eid when Rasulullah pronounced Jummah as a day of Eid? Because it was the birth of my father and your father, Adam alayhi salam. So the answer to that is simple. Rasulullah called every Jummah a day of Eid, but he never said don't fast on that day of Eid. So it's just, once you have a little bit of knowledge and you start reading through all of the ahadith, and don't select for ahadith that are against or that have a perspective for your specific purpose, rather read ahadith and Quranic ayahs with an open mind, you'll get more of a holistic, more of a welcoming approach to Islam.
I agree. I mean, fasting is found in many different occasions of the prophets, right? We're talking about the completion of Hijrah.
Yep.
And the completion of Hijrah was done. They were asked, why are these Jews fasting?
Yep.
Right? They are celebrating the birth of Musa alayhi salam.
Yep.
Or the victory of Musa alayhi salam. And in those cases, Rasulullah sallallahu had narrated that we have more of a right over Musa alayhi salam to celebrate. Right? And that just goes to show you that their celebrations have been done for all of our prophets, specifically Adam alayhi salam. And actually a narration about just celebrating in general. The biggest example that we can refer to is in Sahih Bukhari, where Abu Lahab, right, the biggest enemy of Islam, and upon finding that his brother birthed a son, that is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he with his finger pointed and freed the girl slave Swayba. And it is narrated that in a dream they found that he was
Hazrat Abbas,
Hazrat Abbas found that he is lessened in punishment for celebrating, for rejoicing on the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now this is, we're talking about the greatest enemy.
Well, just so we're clear, he told Abdullah ibn Abbas or Hazrat Abbas, one of the two, that my punishment is lessened every Monday.
Every Monday.
Then he went to Rasulullah, and Rasulullah said that Abu Lahab, because he was happy upon my birth, Allah eases his punishment every single Monday.
And we're talking about, look at the severity, right? We're talking about someone who was not in the fold of Islam, but also
the lowest levels of Jahannam.
Condemned, right? Cursed.
Yep.
And now we as people who show reverence and want to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deeply, and also would aim for that deep love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if we're rejoicing, the reward, it cannot be compared in that case, right?
It really makes you think that if somebody who's not in the fold of Islam and the lowest of the lowest level of Jahannam, if Allah shows mercy to him for rejoicing upon the birth of the beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what would the mercy of Allah be for the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
So I think this sets a baseline that you cannot not be happy of the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Exactly.
Right? That's what it is. Point blank period, you cannot not be happy that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
You have to be happy.
You have to. You have to be happy.
Double negatives, yeah.
Double negatives.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put it that way, we now know that you have to be happy in that case. And now we'll take the step further, right? When you're happy, you naturally have a celebratory expression.
Yep.
Right? Meaning that you express that love through the remembrance of Rasulullah.
Certainly. Yeah.
And in our cases, when we talk about Mawlid, they are a way of honoring and loving Rasulullah. Because we make an event where we are exclusively expressing our remembrance and our love and reminding people of the beautiful characteristics of Rasulullah.
Now keep in mind, collecting yourselves amongst people and celebrating from being part of the ummah of Rasulullah is something that Allah feels pride of amongst his angels. There's a very famous narration. Companions are gathered in Masjid al-Nabwi. They're just seated together. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a very hurried pace, runs out of his hujra mubarak, his house, blessed house, comes and he begins to look at the Sahaba, and they say literally, "Ma ajlasakum." Why are you gathered here? Why are you gathered here? The companions look to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they say, "We are gathered here to praise Allah and to thank Allah for giving us you, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam," i.e., for being part of the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then Rasulullah says, "Swear by it. Take an oath by this statement. This is the only reason you've gathered here." And they take an oath. And Rasulullah says, "Listen, I was not," in mafhum of the hadith, I'm not debating, I'm not doubting your intention. However, I wanted to take an oath because Jibreel alayhi salam just came to me and mentioned that Allah is feeling fakhr, pride amongst his angels for the action of the companions who are seated in Masjid al-Nabwi. So I came out finding out what purpose. The reason that these ahadiths exist is that for the ummah that comes after them, they have a principle, they have an example to go off of. Yeah. So us holding Miladun Nabi and calling it Miladun Nabi, Siratun Nabi, the blessed conference of Rasulullah, mercy for humanity, whatever you want to name it, you're gathered to thank Allah, praise Allah, and to thank Allah for being part of the ummah of Rasulullah. That's really the basis and the crux of all of these mahafil that we have.
Yep, 100%. And we're talking about halaqas, people getting together. There's nothing wrong with that with a greater purpose, right? So that's what we've basically...
I think that hadith that you just mentioned is one of the greater replies to the questions that we get asked but the Sahaba didn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, see, the problem is if you give that or this ahadith as an example to them as a proponent for Mawlid, they'll come back, but where's the word Mawlid mentioned anywhere in it? It's just, we can go in circles all around and we can give you more narrations and you can, and other people, not you, but other people who are against Milad al-Nabi can nitpick on those specific phrases. And it's just, we go back and forth, and really I think you hit the nail on the head by saying it's a different way of celebrating. Like everyone has a different, for example, I'm clothed a different way, you're clothed a different way, and you're clothed a different way. The point of the matter is we have to cover our satar. That's the point. It doesn't matter exactly how you cover your satar.
Yep. You're fulfilling the commandment.
That's
and
it.
You're doing it in a way that respects the religion.
Yes.
All right, and the teachings. And I'm actually glad you brought up that question. I get asked it all the time, but the companions didn't do it.
Yeah.
Right? The companions were in love with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that was a love that is so hard for us to understand.
Yes.
They literally, they breathed, they walked, they slept. All they did was Rasulullah.
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Basically,
And they were in that blessed company that, I mean, it brings a person to tears thinking about how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
But it's also really difficult to understand for a lot of people what it is like. So I think let's talk about some examples of that love,
Sure.
right? I mean, I've heard yourself, Dr. Abdullah, mention some interesting examples of how the companions would follow the footsteps, right, after the passing or after the veiling from this life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In similar ways, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have his hair cut, right, and the collecting of that hair. So I want to hear some examples that maybe you guys have on that.
Do you
I
want
think you're the doctor here. I think you should start us off.
I mean, what are the biggest examples sorry, what was the question?
Examples of the companions
Yeah.
loving Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Oh, I mean, where do you start? There is a small girl. Her name is Hazrat Maimuna bint Qurdam. She comes with her father for Hajjat al-Wida, and she says that we're riding our animals. We're all coming to say our respects and pay our salam to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And actually fought. And she was 6 or 5 years old, very young girl. She fought with her father to be able to accompany him from wherever they lived all the way to Mecca. And her father was really against the journey because obviously it's dangerous 1400 years ago.
Yeah.
And what's a girl gonna do, a young girl gonna do in Hajj with all of these other individuals there, with all of these dangers? But anyway, she's like, no, if you go, I go, because I want to see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she gets there and she says, the haiba and the jalal of Rasulullah was such that my eyes remained down and they were affixated on one part of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And to this day, I cannot get over the beauty of that one part. The asker asks, and this is decades later, by the way, when this happened, which part of Rasulullah? She says, I am still mesmerized by the beauty of the length of the second toe of the right foot of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is how much love they have. Hazrat Uwais Qarni, Rasulullah 4 teeth get shaheed in Uhud, or Hazrat Uwais Qarni or another companion. Anyways, he finds out that some teeth of Rasulullah have been martyred, so he starts knocking them out one by one, literally saying, I don't know which one it is, but if Rasulullah lost the teeth, I'm gonna lose the teeth. Another companion, Hazrat Abdullah, he finds out that Rasulullah's visal has happened. Yeah. He cries out to Allah. He says, oh Allah, take my eyesight from me. Why? Because these eyes only had one purpose, to look upon Rasulullah. If Rasulullah, I cannot look upon him, I have no use for these eyes. And he became blind upon that moment. Yeah. I mean, it's just endless, and I could go on and on and on.
I think one of my favorite other stories from when Rasulullah had lost his blessed teeth was when the Sahabi, he drank the blood of
Correct,
Rasulullah.
He drank the blood, and then Rasulullah says, if you wish to see a man of
when
Jannah,
Hazrat Umar questioned him,
correct, and look to him. And about Mawlid, on the Imam Hajar al-Asqalani actually narrates this as well. On his way back from Tabuk, 30,000 companions sat down, and Hazrat Khuraym bin Aus radiallahu ta'ala, he narrates that Hazrat Abbas radiallahu ta'ala, he comes to the Prophet and he says, Ya Rasulullah, I wish to recite some poetry for you. So with 30,000 companions, he stands up and he says to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Wa anta lamma wulidta ashraqa fil ard. O Prophet, when your milad happens, the entire earth received light because of your milad, because of your birth. And each stanza, and you can literally Google this, each stanza had the word milad in it. And this had at least 12 different narrations and narrators, this particular hadith. Is that not Mawlid? Standing up and reciting poetry on Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam?
I don't think we do anything different than that.
No.
And there's just so many examples that we take a look at that it's just so hard not to think that they wouldn't love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Like, what aspect could you not fall in love with? If that little girl from decades later could remember the small toe of Rasulullah and still be mesmerized by it every single day, then imagine the characteristics, the speech, the speaking with, the part that Rasulullah was sent as a mercy to delegate that mercy to the ummah, the people.
That's right.
Right. And I think people still need to understand what mercy means, what rahmah means, right? When Rasulullah was sent as a mercy for all kind, what does that really mean, right? It's a really difficult concept for some people to wrap their head around, because we talk about rahmah. Rahmah is the most mentioned characteristic of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the noble and holy Quran. So why is that specific characteristic attributed to Rasulullah in the noble Quran? Right? Why was it brought up in this case? Because in the way I see it personally in our interactions is that when you love Rasulullah, you are bringing that rahmah into your life and allowing that rahmah to be brought into the way you behave, into the way you behave with others, relations. We're really interesting because last week I was speaking with a couple of people on how that rahmah just sort of Rasulullah sort of exuded that rahmah, right?
He still exudes this rahmah
till this day, until the end of times. And there was a man who traveled to Madinatul Munawwara on business, and this is during the time that these people, they were still kuffar in Makkah al-Mukarramah, and these were people that had held swords against Rasulullah, right? That was their level of being an enemy. Like, you hold a sword against someone, and that was the reason Rasulullah left for hijrah, right?
Yep.
For the safety of the religion of the people that he was with. And so this man comes, does his business during the day. At night, he doesn't have anywhere to go, so he's pointing in the direction of Rasulullah's house. And Rasulullah invites him in, sits him down, and asks him, "Are you hungry?" This is a man who pointed his sword at Rasulullah. Like, if someone pointed or gave you a bad look nowadays, you will think of 10 ways to beat that man up.
He's enemy number one.
Enemy number one. It's on sight with that person. Yes. And Rasulullah asked this man, "Are you hungry?" He says, "Yes, I am." He leaves, and Rasulullah brings back a bowl of goat's milk, feeds it to him, asks, "Are you still hungry?"
Yeah.
Goes back. After he says yes, goes back and brings back another bowl. 7 times the man says, "I'm still hungry." And so that night he goes to sleep or lays down, but he couldn't sleep all night thinking, what did I do to Rasulullah and what has he done for me? Right? And he couldn't sleep that whole night. And they say a dawn is something awakening. The dawn time came, Fajr came. It was also the dawn of his iman. And as Rasulullah came and approached him, he said, "I would like to read my shahada." And he converted. And then Rasulullah asked him again, "Are you hungry?" Gives him his breakfast and says, after he drinks, he says, "Are you still hungry?" Right? "Are you still hungry?" And it's narrated that he says, "No, I'm not. I'm full." This is a man who drank 7 bowls of milk when his stomach was not filled with iman, but now it's filled with iman. And that whole night, the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not drink or eat anything before sleeping, because they gave everything to that man. There was no tabligh. There was no speech with the man. It was just rahmah on rahmah. It was just action that shows. And if that doesn't tell you anything, I think there's countless examples that we can talk about on mercy.
You know, one of the things, and I think we'll take a small break after this as well, but you mentioned rahmah, and I want to hit on a little bit of a controversial topic here as well. A lot of people say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is dead. Na'udhu billah, astaghfirullah. Well, you're literally refuting the Quran, and refuting the Quran is kufr. Exactly. You can't be a Muslim if you refute the Quran. So now you'll ask me how.
Yep.
Everyone knows and loves this ayah. Yep. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. What does all the worlds mean? Everything that Allah has created is the worlds.
Yeah.
Yep. From the 7th heaven, Sidratul Muntaha and below. And even above, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Rabbil Alameen. He's the Rabb of everything. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about his prophet, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْ. The exact same wordage and verbiage is used. So that means, in the ulama they say, for whatever thing that Allah is Rabb for, Rasulullah is distributing the rahmah of Allah for.
Yeah.
How can someone dead distribute rahmah? That makes no sense. Whichever way you want to look at it. So that's why, I mean, I think we need to go back into more of a welcoming approach of Islam, understand different perspectives, ask questions, but don't ask questions to the point where I'm going to ask you a question to stump you, to throw you into Jahannam.
Mm. No, you shouldn't get yourself stuck in any situation.
Jannah is big, man. Like,
There's space
there's
for
big
all of
room
us.
for everyone.
There is room for everyone.
And anyone who says La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah is going to end up in
Jannah. Upon the mercy of
upon the mercy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
and we all believe that we are going to go to Jannah because we have that faith, inshallah.
Well,
We
that
all-
and our attitudes.
and our attitude. Yeah, exactly. And hopefully we embody some of that into our lives. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We spoke about the Rahmah just shortly and many examples of it. Now, I know we spoke about celebrations. Now we have a 1400-year legacy, right, of celebrating the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There being ijma', right, on the celebration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's, birth, and specifically in Rabiul Awwal Mawlid as well. Now there's so many different ways of showing that expression of happiness and that celebration. So I think let's talk about that, right? We right now just spoke about how in Halakha we do poetry,
Yeah.
right? Remembrance. There's also seerah, but there's also cultural aspects, right? There's so many different cultural aspects that comes into celebration. Can you guys think of any that maybe come to mind, spring to mind, and how that tradition has kept the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam going?
You know what I think? On this might be a little bit of a hot take as well, but I think bid'ah has become cultural rather than religious.
That's interesting. Why would you think
Can
that?
you, like,
Well, because people don't understand that there are multiple types of bid'ah.
Yeah.
And they bid'ah, just innovation. They don't understand the difference between bid'ah lughwiyya. They don't understand bid'ah makruha. There's so many.
They don't agree with the different types of innovation.
No. Any scholar worth his salt knows the types of bid'ah.
I'm talking more so like the general.
Well, the general person doesn't know what the farais of salah are, but everyone knows what bid'ah is.
Yeah.
Because if you go up to any Mr. ABC and Johnny on the street and you say, "What are the farais of salah?" They won't know. They won't be able to distinguish between fard, salah, sunnah of just the salah itself. They'll be able to tell you what to do, but they don't know this is the fard, this is the sunnah, this is the wajib, this is the mubah, this is etc. etc. etc.
And do you think that culture is Western predominant or?
Oh, this is very much Eastern. This I think started out from the Middle East where it kind of took root. And I think those people initially did have an inkling of what bid'ah
Past
was.
200 years ish.
Yeah. And so they did takfir, very carefully.
yeah.
Oh.
Unfortunately, when it started spreading and this bid'ah notion took place, which is an Arabic word, by the way, I think it's become an Urdu word now. But anyways, when it kind of took place in Pakistan and India, it's all of a sudden bid'ah.
Kafir.
Bid'ah. And obviously in takfir kind of plays a role into it. I mean, on some of our Instagram posts, we put Mercy for Humanity or Grand Mawlid Conference. Somebody said bid'ah with like hands up.
Bid'ah
Technically, the
police,
hands
yeah.
up is a bid'ah too if you look at it.
Oh, what, using
Which
Instagram?
Sahabi puts his hand up like this saying bid'ah? So it's like, where are you going to draw the line about this bid'ah is allowed, this bid'ah is not allowed?
Yeah.
So I think we have to be very, very, very careful about drawing lines and new lines within the deen and have room for everyone. First of all, understand, go to any alim, tell him and ask him, what are the types of bid'ah? Sit down, understand it. This is going to take weeks to be able to wrap your head around the notion and the concept of bid'ah. Then you should be able to learn a little bit of Arabic to be able to distinguish. Right?
Yeah.
And then obviously qiyas comes into this.
Yeah, analogy.
On all of these different ijma has to be involved in
with
this.
it, yeah.
And then you
Consensus.
can kind of make a ruling.
Yeah.
No person, Tom, Dick, or Harry on the street can make any sort of reference about this particular thing within Islam Why are you guys laughing?
These guys in
Sorry.
the back, man.
I think you should use Muslim names.
Yeah.
Aslam, Akbar, and Maryam.
Maryam, there you go. Because why would they be asking about bid'ah?
Sorry.
Why
Maybe I was
Tom
thinking
asked
about
this
converts. Sorry, guys.
Why would they be asking about
Yeah,
bid'ah?
sorry, that's my Canadian upbringing, I guess. But anyways, it's like I forgot my point of thought.
No, that's all right. I mean, when we're talking about bid'ah, generally speaking, I think nowadays we've really simplified Islam in general, and so when we get an opinion that we think has scholarly backing because it's taken at a surface level, that's it. That is the opinion. That's what we're going to run with. This is bid'ah. Bid'ah means innovation. Innovation is bad equals we're not allowed to do this.
Yeah.
But here's another thing, right? If we all agree that being happy for the birth of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is allowed and you have to do it, right? Maybe people can disagree with how we celebrate it, right? I think that's a commonality that a lot of us can express and maybe agree with, right? You can express it that way.
Mm-hmm.
You celebrate the birth of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam through poetry, through halakah, through getting together. And then there's other people who express it through the fast, right? Or express it through the remembrance of reading the seerah, right?
Yeah.
These different expressions of celebration,
Yeah.
right? But it's hard to now talk about that doing any action for the sake of the birth of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is bid'ah, is where we're going left field.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, we also some people really take things out of left field as well, though. Like they go haywire on this bid'ah. Like there's dancing, there's it's just a lot of things that I feel is actually disrespectful to Rasulullah.
Yep.
So, one thing that I'm kind of struggling with right now, and maybe you guys could help me out with a little bit. I was speaking to this person, and we were discussing cutting cakes in Mawlid. So he's like, sometimes you write on the cake, birthday of Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then you use a knife to cut the name Muhammad.
Yeah.
Isn't that disrespectful?
Yeah, I think you can definitely take
You can
it
make that
way.
argument.
You can make that argument without
And
a
then
doubt.
all of a sudden, I'm like, he has a point.
But I think if you're making that argument, then that means you have this inkling in you that's telling you that's disrespectful, then don't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, it's so simple. Like,
Yeah.
Islam was made easy for us.
Yep.
Islam
yep.
was never made difficult.
And in your
right?
heart, you know what's right and wrong.
You know what's
Right?
right and wrong.
You're
If
your
you
ruh.
think that some people may have that innocence where they're like, it's not like that. And they would have never thought that way. But if there's 2-3 people sitting there thinking, oh my God, you're cutting the name that says Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam on it,
Yeah.
and that's disrespectful, then don't do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Why complicate the situation?
Yep.
I guess that's my opinion on it. I'm sure you probably spoke to him and he probably...
No, honestly, I acknowledge. I'm like, to be honest, my mind never went that way.
Yeah.
Because nobody really looks to they just attack Mawlid.
Yeah.
But maybe if we attacked not attack, but maybe talk about individual actions like this, for example, like that really struck me. I don't have any issue with cutting cake, but now I have an issue with cutting the name Muhammad, if it's written on there, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So why not just leave it blank
Yeah.
and just cut the cake as a form of celebration?
Because you're giving sweets to someone, and right?
Distributing
Like,
sweets. This is just a way of celebrating.
there's so many ways. The companions made each other happy by giving each other dates, right?
Yes.
As gifts.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
that is a form of sweet that you would give. Like, there's so many different analogies.
I mean,
you see.
Rasulullah used to give, like, for example, Jabir bin Abdullah, he gifted him, it's a long story, but anyways, long story short, he gifted him a camel. Nobody gifts camels nowadays
Yeah.
because what am I going to do with a camel?
Right.
But in today's day and age, you can do something similar,
Yeah.
that expresses happiness and gift giving.
You can give your
It's the
Land
culture.
Rover,
Well, we need a big heart for that.
Definitely. And that just shows that, like, something that maybe to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was something of a passing, right? An action. It's just like, it's considered such a big act for us, such a
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
giving, right? It's because it's hard for us to digest that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I keep on, like, repeating this again and again, that mercy is such a hard thing for us to understand, because we don't understand. If we can't understand the depths of the universe, how can we understand the depths of the mercy of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? If we can't compute in our minds how vast the universe is, how vast the creation of just the lower heavens is, how can we compute the vastness of the rahmah?
Yeah.
Right?
Very true.
And And it goes to show you that all those things, like you said, are creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are receiving that mercy, right? Through Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in different forms. It's just so hard to think about it.
You can never really understand how big the mercy is.
And how
Like
vast
if
it
you
is.
you look at it, you look at the mercy of the Ahl Bayt,
Yeah.
right? وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا. That whole where for 3 days straight, that was straight mercy. And that's from the Ahlul Bayt. That's the mercy of the family of the Prophet. So what would the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ be? Right?
No, it's a good point.
I mean, on that point, we can talk about this. Should we stand up and say salam to Rasulullah?
It's a great question, and I
think
think we have
I think there was an issue during a Jummah once when that happened, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
we have scholarly reference for some cases of people doing it.
I mean, there's a scholarly reference certainly in a Sahih Hadith that Rasulullah forbid it.
Mm-hmm.
The Sahaba stood up and Rasulullah said, sit down.
Sit down.
Don't stand up for me. And he came and he sat down. But the way that ulama look at it is, if you want other people to stand up for it, it's haram. However, if people do it out of love and out of respect, then it's allowed. My thing is, we stand up for O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, all of us have gone, even if you go to Islamic school, they stand up for the national anthem.
You
Yeah.
can't move during the
Anywhere
national
you
anthem.
go.
And you
Yeah.
can't
And you
move,
can't
and you're
move.
standing up.
Yeah.
And some people even, like in
You put your hand.
God Save the whatever the American national anthem is, but they put their hands over here,
Yeah.
you know, and they do it with pride. I mean, I've seen many Pakistanis,
Yeah,
Pak says Amin, Shad, Bad, and
yeah.
immediately at attention.
Yeah.
So if you can stand up for respect for your country, but you can't stand up in respect for your Nabi, I can't like justify that.
So how
So-
do you justify it against what you just narrated then?
I justify it because Rasulullah, we don't stand up for Rasulullah because he wants us to stand up for him. We stand up for him out of respect. Furthermore, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away and the Sahaba were coming up to extend and give their salam to him, did they give it sitting down?
Nope.
They gave it standing up.
Standing up.
Yeah.
So what about that hadith?
And they gave salam after the veiling.
That's
of
right.
Rasulullah
That's
sallallahu
right.
Which is another thing.
I mean, we all give salam to him now.
Yeah,
Assalamu alayka
Ayyuhan
ayyuhan nabi.
It's in our prayer
Every single time.
every single time.
Yep.
And this is not 1400 years ago.
No.
This is today.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're in 2024.
Yep.
And we're doing that action, and we're doing it as ordained to us in the most obligatory action, which is prayer.
Similarly, in the Quran, Muhammadur Rasulullah. Muhammad is the Rasul of Allah.
Yeah.
Not was.
Is.
He
Is
is the Rasul of
Rasul of
Allah.
Allah.
And even when you give salam to someone that you know you'll get a reply from.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't just
You can make a point, like when we stand up and read salam, there are certain terms that even for me blur the lines. Like I feel like the Naat Khan goes a little too far.
Yeah.
To the common listener. Like if you understand really what the Naat Khan is getting at, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But for the common listener, it's like,
Yikes.
yikes.
Yeah.
You know, like I could understand how people might take exception to that. So
Okay.
maybe we, especially in gatherings where you know that other people may not have the knowledge with which the Naat Khan is reciting that Naat, and usually, to be honest with you, Naat Khans don't know themselves.Ey're just reading a set Naat.
Is that personal?
No, it's not personal.
Damn.
That's not personal. I'm just saying,
All right, guys.
they don't
I'm gonna leave.
they don't
my
research
leave now.
they don't research every single stanza. They should, but they
No,
don't. It's
they
just
don't.
it's there, it's beautiful, and
Pick it
they
up, you
take it
read
at
it.
face value. But some of these, I mean, ki Muhammad se wafa tune to hum tere hain, jahan cheez hai kya Allahu kalam tere hain. Like that's a bar. By Allama Iqbal. But it's like people don't people don't understand. Like, okay, another one. Safai dahir se batil ko mitaya हमने किसने नोए इंसान को गुलामी से छुड़ाया किसने मेरे काबे को जबीनों से सजाया किसने मेरे कुरान को सीनों से लगाया किसने थे तो वो आबा तुम्हारे ही मगर तुम क्या हो हाथ पे हाथ धरे मुंतज़िर फरदा हो. A bar.
Yeah. And we might need to put some subtitles on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. We'll put subtitles for that. But mashallah, that's poetry.
But it
Yeah.
raises the question, like, why do they read it if they don't know what they're reading?
I mean, yeah, we won't get into that.
Right?
We,
Like-
see, my answer to that is we do that every single day with Salah.
That's true.
Ooh,
100%.
that's a great point.
But it's not sort of like a thing like don't do it. It's sort of like, okay, if you do it, then understand it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Take it as a positive note.
Oh,
Yeah.
certainly,
Like,
yeah.
what do you say during your salah? What do you say when you do salam or Rasulullah
Yeah.
sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What are you
Yeah.
aiming at?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
is like if you recite poetry to someone, you want to know what that poetry means,
yeah.
right?
I mean, some people just recite poetry because, damn, that sounds nice.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? But if you really understand poetry, like especially religious poetry, like what Hassan ibn Sabit radiallahu ta'ala
Yeah,
anhu he
mashallah.
stated, you know,
وأجمل
damn.
كلام
وأحسن
ترقت
من
Yeah,
عيني.
كلام ترقت عيني واجمل طالع البدر علينا من ثنية, that one. All of these, mashallah, really positive poetries that existed even at the time of Rasulullah.
Yep.
So.
And it goes to show you that that poetry started then; it didn't start after.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And, okay, that's not an innovation. Poetry is
Yeah.
something that was done then and something that is done now.
Yep.
And there's different forms of it, which raises a question that, okay, we do poetry, we speak about it, we remember Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in different ways and forms. You should know what you're talking about. That's what we've reminded ourselves with. I think each culture has their different ways of doing poetry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sort of gets muddled in,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think when you talk about bidah culture,
Yeah.
I don't think people, even we, don't even understand how vast Islam is right now,
Oh, yeah.
where it's reached, what villages it's in,
Yep.
where in the world.
Forget that. We don't understand the Quran. There was a Naat Khan Kilab bin Rabi'a, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he accepted Islam. Huge Naat Khan, like one of the biggest ones, poetry,
Yeah.
poet in Arabic.
Naat Khan also means nasheed artist.
Nasheed
just
artist,
for,
yeah. So
clarity.
in pre-Islamic eras, at the time of the Banu Hashim and all that, he was a very big poet. Accepted Islam. Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, why don't you write any more nasheeds? Why don't you recite any more prose or poetry for Islam? Now, he's like, how can I recite any poetry when Surah Baqarah exists?
Yeah,
Because he understood what the Quran is. That's
what
poetry.
it is.
That's
yeah.
perfection in language and in mantiq, in logic, anything. That's perfection.
Yeah. And sort of why we always emphasize in halaqah, if you read the Quran and there's people who don't know Arabic,
Yeah.
translate it.
Yeah, of course.
I
Always.
think it's a healthy practice.
Yep.
Translate
Yep.
it. What's stopping you from just taking the extra 5 minutes? If someone's doing qirat, then you take the time to also translate it so that people are in their habitual day, they are reading the Quran and also listening to what it means,
Yeah.
right? Because the Quran was made for us to be understood easily.
Yep.
Like you can read it, you can understand it, and it directly, you feel it in your heart, right?
You know, I think we should do a completely separate segment on poetry and nasheeds.
I agree.
I think that it'll be really helpful for everyone as well, and where
Yeah.
it comes from and the linguistic meaning and everything.
Yeah.
Inshallah, but we'll definitely, because we're going away from Mawlid.
Yeah, we're
That's why I want to kind of rope it back in.
And the
as
reason
well.
why I spoke about the world and how vast it is and we don't understand where Islam is because we think that maybe it's certain ethnic groups that only practice, like,
True.
celebrating.
Yeah.
True.
Right? Like, I hear all the time, it's, I'm Pakistani, you guys are Pakistani too. Like, it's you South Asian subcontinent people who do
Yeah.
that. No, like, we just came. Like,
Yeah.
we just existed like
Yeah.
600 years ago.
But Imam Hajar al-Asqalani,
Yeah.
Imam Nabhani, all of these big shuyukh who used to do it.
A big shiu who
Yeah.
used to do it far before our continent was even made.
Yeah.
And where they were even made into Muslims, right? So I think that's something that really strikes a lot of people in our community very difficultly because we get approached and then I've heard those comments personally. You've probably heard them as
Yeah.
well. Like, you're bringing this practice because of your culture. It has nothing to do with culture.
I think the
No.
term
If,
that goes.
if my culture promotes love and peace for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'll claim it.
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
term that gets thrown around a lot is just Barelvi. I
Ah.
think you probably heard.
I
that
mean,
one.
I think I speak for all of us when I say we're not Brahilvis.
Yeah, it's
We're
No.
Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah.
Jama'ah.
We are
That's it.
Sunni
yeah,
Muslims.
And that's
Um,
another misunderstanding, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
When a word like bidah can get thrown around, but words like this get thrown around too.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
And I think that's a common thing. If we're talking about Mawlid, like,
Yeah.
do ourselves a favor, everyone out there, stop throwing out words that you don't know the gravity
History
of,
over the etymology of
the
I think-
etymology of, or
Yeah.
the gravity of.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what it is
Yeah,
to
and-
call someone a kafir?
Yeah.
That is, and we definitely need to have a conversation on this in another
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
The gravity of that
Yeah.
is, you should not be doing that.
Yeah. And you know what the Prophet did, right? To someone who did something similar. They were on the battlefield, and he grabbed someone. This individual, I forgot his name, but anyways, the Sahabi is about to martyr him, or not martyr him, kill him, in war.
Yeah.
The guy looks up to the Sahabi and he says, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh." Looks at him, chops his head off. Okay. All of a sudden he starts feeling doubt. He's like, "Oh, he just read the kalima, but I know he only read it because he was scared of my sword and he didn't want to die." So he just goes to Rasulullah in passing. He says, "Ya Rasulullah, we were in the battlefield. He was about to kill me, but then I overtook him and I was about to kill him." And then he read the Shahada. He took the oath of Islam, and then I still killed him. Rasulullah looks at him and he says, "What have you done? What have you done? What have you done?" Like repeated it. Then he says, again, O Sahabi, whatever his name was, he says, "Did you take his heart out and listen to what was inside of his heart?"
Wow.
And then he says, "What will you do when he comes out of his grave on the day of judgment reciting the Shahada? What will you do? What will you do? What will you do?" This companion, he says, "I wish I had accepted Islam after this point," because of how many times Rasulullah repeated that. So, and we today, everyone's a kafir for us.
Oh,
For one group especially. So again, we got to stay away from this thing about everyone being a kafir.
We're just saying words that
That
like
we don't know
why.
understand the gravity.
What are you doing?
I think that's why
Like,
the
right?
ulama, they say that no knowledge is better than little knowledge.
I think I say that.
You're an ulama for
He
us.
does say
bro.
that often.
He's
He
an
does
ulama.
say it
often.
often.
He's an ulama for us, bro.
Yeah. That doesn't mean
Um,
you should have no knowledge.
Yeah, but
Just
No.
like I don't
Take it
pass
easy.
on any verdict. You don't pass on any verdict. I've never heard you pass on any verdict. Why would you pass on a verdict if you don't know?
some of the brothers in my
When you
DMs
like
pass
guys,
on verdicts
listen,
real quick.
we all have Google, yeah.
Yeah.
You guys get let's say a cough.
Yeah.
You don't go to the pharmacy and just pick up any other drug and start popping pills. Why? Because you're scared it's gonna affect you. You go to the doctor and the doctor says take amoxicillin or you take this or take Benadryl or take this. You don't question the doctor.
Her NyQuil's good though. I mean,
But it's like you don't
no, that's
question
the
them on
fact of
that.
the matter.
Yeah.
If you go to the specialist
Yeah.
in our field in Islam in theology, it is the ulama,
Yes.
and it's not just any ulama. It's
yeah, we
muhaddis.
gotta be. That's another
Like-
topic as well. That
It's a whole nother topic.
because nowadays everyone's an alim.
everyone's an
and
alim.
everyone's
everyone
a
who
Mawlid.
does
Sheikh Google.
Sheikh Ninawi said something very interesting in our thing. He's like, anyone who reads a little bit of books thinks they're Sheikh al-Islam.
yeah. Or it goes on Islamic Q&A.
Yeah,
Or
it's
Sunnah.com.
Sunnah.com.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I have read hadiths before in my studies that then I go to Sunnah.com to just get the snippet for,
Yeah.
but I
For the
don't go
reference
there to learn it just off face value
It's
because
not our ustad.
that we learn from the Sunnah. It doesn't mean we can teach ourselves the Sunnah.
Agreed.
Right? We use our teachers. We use 1,400 years of scholarship to help teach us.
Yeah.
Right? Because all those years of scholarship, they refined the understanding for us to understand. Because times change, people's understanding change. I guarantee you, if we existed 1,400 years ago, we would be lost.
Yeah.
We'd be like headless chickens running around. We wouldn't even know what we're doing.
Agreed.
Right? And many people say that if they saw how we practice religion now, like could we even be called Muslims with how we called people kafir, how we call people innovators and things like that, right? There's serious gravity in these situations.
Yep.
But I'm glad we have now clarified a very tense topic
Yeah.
for a lot of people, right? Because, I mean, you guys all hear it all the time.
Yeah, and honestly, you guys, whenever you guys read or listen to this podcast, if you have questions, add them into the comments, and then inshallah we'll address these comments and questions in
I agree.
further
For
podcasts,
sure.
and you'll get our perspective. If nothing else, it might not be a scholarly answer, but at least it'll be a perspective for you to consider wholeheartedly, open-mindedly. That's something within the realm of Islam and the Muslim population that's missing.
And I think a really good English book for this is a book called Mawlid by Shaykh al-Islam, Dr. Muhammad Tariq
Yep,
Qadri.
yep.
And it has every reference from Quran, Sunnah,
yeah.
and the ijma of
Scholars.
scholars.
Yep.
I'm pretty
And
sure it even has a list of all the scholars.
list of
Yeah.
all the scholars with narrations,
Yeah.
which sort of puts everything in perspective
Yeah.
because it's so easy. It's in English.
Yep.
and that sort of helped me understand it.
Yep.
And I think you can read the book every single time and gain deeper understanding
Yeah,
with
yeah.
it. It is our understanding that when you read a book of a teacher, it is as if you are sitting in that class
In
of
the
that
company
teacher,
of
in the
that
company
teacher.
of that teacher, right? You're sitting in a class, you're the student of that teacher. So that's how we like to see it, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah,
Right?
inshallah.
And there's a good place to start there. We talk about the mercy of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We talked about the Mawlid Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We've talked about reciting poetry, and I definitely agree. We have a lot to talk about there.
Yeah.
I
This
think
will be a
next
good one.
time we'll gather your guys' opinions. We'll set up our next topics going forward, and we appreciate you all for tuning in. Thank you so much, guys, and inshallah, catch you all soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu
Assalamu
alaikum.
alaikum wa rahmatullah.